Hi, how are you? This one's not going to keep you on the edge of your seat with excitement, but I would argue that what I'm going to talk about is the foundation on which almost every aspect of our emotions and of trading psychology are based. I've attained this knowledge through my college psychology classes, where I have a 3.9 GPA. If we're only counting psychology, I have a 4.0. I say this to ensure that you can trust the validity of these scientifically proven concepts, and as someone who is about to become a social worker, I assure you that I'm here to help, and not to get you to buy a course. The video will be time-stamped with different sections, but I obviously recommend that you watch everything if you are serious about improving mentally as a trader, which many argue can be more important than the actual trading system. I believe that all of the videos I make are important, because that's why I make them, but this one may be the most important so far, due to it being so fundamental to the human experience. Okay, enough chit-chat. The real-world applications and the potential of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is something that I find to be incredible. Part of what it does is that it aims to explain how you and I can both experience the same event, but interpret it completely differently by showing how our thoughts influence our feelings and our behaviors. Two people take the same losing trade. The first guy is miserable and is losing hope at his ability to be consistently profitable. Meanwhile, the second guy says to himself, "That was unfortunate, but that's how trading works." He brushes it off and moves on to the next setup without being bothered in the slightest. How does this happen? What is happening in their brain that causes the difference between them reacting to the same experience? I promise that everybody has something to learn from this, and there are many of you who will find this more helpful than any trading guide or price pattern video if you really allow yourself to be open to this information. Okay, let's get right to it. The ABC model explains the interactions between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. A is the activating event, and we will use losing $100 on a trade as an example. B is the belief, and this is what we believe about the event. This belief is the part that is unique to each person, and it is the belief of the activating event that was different between those two traders who reacted differently to losing a trade. Here's a not-so-fun fact for you. Someone who's depressed is more likely to interpret an event as negative, and someone who isn't is likely to interpret the event as neutral or as positive. So, after a loss, someone whose mental health is doing well is more likely to believe that it was a good learning experience, while someone with depression is more likely to come away from that trade feeling angry towards themselves or feeling some other types of negative emotions. This is taught in therapy because awareness of how our thought processes and emotions affect each other is how we can begin to challenge these negative thought patterns. C is the consequence of the belief, which includes how we feel, our emotions, and what we do, our behavior. For that first trader who lost, he feels hopeless and emotional about losing, and, as a result, his behavior ends up causing him to be more hesitant about the next trade, so he sets a stop loss at the amount he is willing to risk, rather than at a level that makes sense, like a pivot high or low. And, because of this, he gets stopped out right before the price moves in the direction he thought it was going to go. This compounds his hopelessness and his fear, and it is a vicious cycle. Enough of the basics. Let's get to the part where we fix it. We can't change the event because we can't manipulate the market, to an extent. However, the events that we can avoid are not taking trades where the only logical stop loss is really far away, and we can also avoid bad setups that we only want to take because trading is fun. That leaves the belief in the consequence, and since the consequences are caused by the belief, it obviously makes the most sense to try and change our belief about the event. A learning mindset is crucial. I would even go as far as to say that for beginners like myself, doing a trade without thinking about what we learned from it is a guaranteed way to fail. Everything that we do is to learn more and to become better. In CBT, one of the best ways to challenge beliefs is by asking yourself, is there actually evidence for this belief? Do you struggle with thinking that you can't be successful doing trading and you've only been doing it for a few months or even less than a few years? All of the people that I respect who are successful traders took several years to become consistently profitable. So, are you actually being realistic when you have negative thoughts about yourself and trading? When you lose a trade, is your belief that the market is rigged, that the system is designed to make you fail, or that your stops are being chased? That's a bunch of baloney, although there are some situations where stops may actually be hunted. But I promise you that some guy at Goldman Sachs didn't move the entire S&P 500 down 1 point just to specifically take out your stop loss before rocketing up 100 points. That's a topic for another video though, since there are some circumstances where stopping out a bunch of people at an obvious price level can give big traders the liquidity that they need. Challenge your beliefs. Is there evidence to support how you interpreted an event? Is there an alternative explanation that makes more sense, but maybe your emotions are clouding your judgment? Our behavior after a trade is crucial. If we mess up and then try to avoid the situation again, which we knew wasn't guaranteed to work, we will miss setups. We can't always be right. A system can only be proven to work if we try it multiple times. If we always skip around and try something different because of one loss, we will never become successful because there is nothing that works every time. This is a mindset that I used to have, and someone helped me out with this problem by telling me that I needed to give it more time. Everybody sees the world through a different lens. My beliefs about myself, about others, and about the world are different from yours, and this causes us to interpret events differently. Part of helping people with something like depression is to challenge the core beliefs that we have about the world. These core beliefs define who we are, and they guide how we live our lives. If you are someone who thinks the world is against you, you may feel anger or resentment towards the markets after a loss. This core belief has to be addressed. CBT is not about changing all of your thoughts into happy ones. It's about questioning the validity of unrealistic or irrational beliefs. It's okay to not think that the world is a happy place, and it's okay to think that the stock market is unfair or brutal. It becomes not okay when your belief that the world is against you causes you to think that your trading success is not dependent on your own efforts. You are in control of your learning process, and you have to take responsibility for everything that you do. This is the locus of control, and I almost made a video specifically on this, but it would have only been like 2 minutes long, so I decided not to. An internal locus of control describes a person who believes that their destiny is in their own hands. They believe that what happens in their life is up to them. The success of your trading career is up to you. Just because others around you have failed does not mean that you can't do it. There are a lot of negative people who are bitter about day trading because they could not succeed, and they think that it is impossible to do just because they couldn't do it. They project their own issues onto others, ignore them, and try to feel bad for them rather than take their attacks personally. This is what I do because that's how I'm wired, but I understand the urge to respond with their level of bitterness. If everything in your life feels out of control, grab onto something that can't be taken away from you. Some people really do live chaotic lives and are born into horrible circumstances, but most people think that they aren't in control of what happens to them because it is the easy way out. It requires less effort, or it is a core belief that may stem from low self-esteem or some other factor. Either way, it is possible to change this part of who you are. It is not some physical part of your brain. It is an attitude and a perspective. This section is about cognitive distortions. This has everything to do with trading, but it's not as directly applicable as some of the other things I've said, like how I recommend doing chart trading so that you can automate your order to reduce anxiety. But how can we be the best versions of ourselves, and therefore the best traders we can be, if there are parts of our mind that are bringing us down? Some of these are more important than the others, but let's get right into it. Emotional reasoning is when you believe something is true because that's how you feel. Does that resonate with you? Do you know anyone who is scared of planes but not cars, even though you're statistically more likely to die in a car? Sometimes we feel a certain way, so we believe it to be true, even though the facts completely disagree. That's being out of touch with reality, which sounds extreme, but we do these things every day, and almost everybody does them. Our brain can be very mean to us sometimes and make us feel low about something, even if people from an outside perspective would be completely confused by how obviously wrong it is. Just because we feel like the market is going to go up today does not mean that it's true. Just because we feel like the price is going to bounce back, it does not make it true. For example, there are so many people who feel like they are fat, even though their weight reflects a perfectly normal BMI. For those of you who may be overwhelmed by trading, or you recently took a loss and you're thinking about quitting, those feelings do not mean that you can't handle it. It can be overwhelming, which is why many people give up. Many will take that as a sign that what they're trying to achieve is too much for them to handle. But complying with this urge is what caused that statistic of 95 or whatever percent of traders failing to be so high. But now we know that emotional reasoning is a cognitive distortion. Logically, it does not make sense. And remember, this is not about belittling emotions or about minimizing someone's experience. It's about thinking objectively and factually, rather than thinking and acting with our emotions, which often mislead us. It's not about dismissing how we feel. It's about recognizing when we have beliefs that do not logically make sense. Disqualifying the positive is something I can relate to when I used to play high-level soccer or football for everywhere else in the world except for where I am. This is when we ignore the positive aspects of a situation and we overfocus on the negative. Did you go a couple weeks making a bunch of awesome trades and feeling good about yourself, and then you blew away all of those profits with one bad trade? So you had 15 good or at least neutral events happen to you, and all you can focus on is the one bad thing? It doesn't make any sense, but it's what we do. I used to leave a soccer game after having a great game, multiple goals, assists, and good plays, but I would be thinking about the one or two plays that I messed up. Now that just doesn't make any sense. Why should I have ignored all of those awesome things that I did while only focusing on the one thing I messed up? So, be easier on yourself. You may have done something stupid, like what I did with that cash secured put, but what about all of those other great plays? It's part of being human, but sometimes it kinda sucks to be human. Recognizing these things that we are predisposed to do helps us to combat them. Challenge yourself when you are being unrealistically negative and are disqualifying the positive. Say, hey brain, quit being, as my mom says, a nincompoop. Give equal treatment of your energy to the positive things you've done, and don't just hyper-focus on the negative. Recognize when you are doing this, and try to find power in the realization that it is an illogical way of thinking. It's difficult, and it takes a lot of practice, but it works. Now, these ones are important for our lives, but their application isn't as specific to trading as the other ones are. All or nothing thinking is our tendency to think of things in extremes, or black and white. Either we are dumb or smart, ugly or beautiful, and so on and so forth. Often, we forget about all of the gray in the middle. These examples make it sound like, yeah, duh, whatever, blah blah blah. But how many times does something happen throughout the day, and your mind makes an overgeneralization like, people suck? We do it all the time, but we don't always realize it. The human experience is much more than just two extremes. Catastrophizing is when our mind finds the worst possible explanation for something, rather than focusing on the explanations that make more sense. Has anyone ever been late to something and you thought to yourself, I wonder if they got in a car accident? Maybe you've been thinking about going to a party, but you were thinking about the worst possible things that could happen. When we assume that the worst has happened, that just doesn't make any sense. Because rarely do these worries ever come to fruition. Fruition. Overgeneralization is our tendency to make a rule out of something, as if that event can predict all future events. It's a little hard to describe, but people who say things like always and never are usually overgeneralizing. Like, if on EFs the price bounced off 4,400, that doesn't mean it's going to happen every time. It is rare that while trading we should be having thoughts that include the words never and always, because that's rarely how the market works. For the most part, there is too much uncertainty to make definitive statements, and thinking in this way really limits our ability to soak in new information, to adapt, and to develop more effective perspectives. When we learn about these cognitive distortions, we can begin to recognize when our mind is playing tricks on us. When we do things like disqualifying the positive, we can recognize those thought processes and challenge them. We can think back at them with challenge questions like, is that really true? Or, is that fair? When we challenge our thoughts, we can begin to change our thinking, which, in turn, changes the way that we feel and the way that we behave. Another thing I would like to make clear is that this is not about invalidating emotions. Some people misinterpret CBT as dismissing how we feel, but that's not what it is at all. This is about changing the way we think so that our thought processes are more healthy, more realistic, and more helpful. In turn, this makes us feel better, and then our behavior will reinforce those realistic thoughts and positive emotions. Becoming aware of the thoughts and behaviors that are hurting our growth as traders is how we solve our problems. You are watching this right now. so you're already doing way more than the average person who thinks they can just throw money at the market and start trading as a job. Do not give up hope, even when it seems like you are at the bottom. When you try again, you immediately separate yourself from the millions who have failed before you. If anything here resonated with you, try watching more videos on these topics, or ask me for help or further clarification. I created an Instagram account for this channel called iMan Trading Futures, which I will link in the description. If you go there, you'll find out what my first name is. I'll give you a hint. It's not iMan Trading. I know, shocking. I don't have plans on what to use it for yet, but I wanted to get it started so that it has time to age before the scammers find me and start trying to impersonate me to steal your money. I'll never ask you for money, so when that inevitably happens, just know it's not me. I hope this helped you.